but no one knew. I searched through the archives and it wasn't there until I read. I was in the dark until I read. The serpent held my heart until I read. Ignorance led the way until I read. All hope was in vain. Until I read. I thought all hope was in vain.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Absolute Truth. This is the Bible show that focuses on the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth concerning the Word of God, while leaving out all personal opinions, speculations, and beliefs. I'm Brother Joshua, and today reading for me is Brother LeVar. Go say hi to the people, LeVar.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody be edified today.
All right. Thank you, LeVar. And the title of today's lesson is the wilderness in Revelation 12 a literal wilderness? Again, today's lesson is titled, Is the wilderness in Revelation 12 a literal wilderness? And I decided to do this class because you have a lot of people that always preach a genuine concern for the tribulation that is going to be going on in the end times. Now, for most Sunday Christians, this isn't really that hot of a topic because they all teach that we're just going to be raptured off somewhere. They teach that right before this so-called 7-year tribulation, Jesus is going to secretly return and just take all the Christians off to heaven and leave the wicked here on earth for 7 years. But when it comes to the Hebrew Israelites, they don't believe in a rapture. What they teach about is the place of safety, which most of them call the wilderness. And there's nothing wrong with them calling it the wilderness because that's what it's called in Revelation 12. But the problem is they will go to Revelation 12, read about this wilderness, and then they will go on a mad search through the scriptures trying to locate this wilderness that's mentioned in Revelation 12. And they go to all kinds of places in the Old Testament, and they read about all kinds of different wildernesses mentioned in the Old Testament, mainly like in Isaiah and Ezekiel. And they'll say, see, this is where we need to flee during the Great Tribulation. They will even give you the exact name of this wilderness. But what many of them don't realize is two things. Number one, nowhere in the Bible does it ever instruct anybody to go anywhere. It never instructs us to go to any specific wilderness. Never says that. In fact, when you read Revelation 12, all it says, which we're going to read, is that to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle that she may fly to her place to be nourished. It does not say somebody came and told her, hey, go over there. It gives the indication that it will not be known until that time happens. Just like when the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt. They didn't know where they were going to go until Moses and Aaron came on the scene and told them. So how can anybody read Revelation 12 and think that means they're supposed to take it upon themselves to try to identify this wilderness? The second thing that's wrong with this is people who teach that Revelation 12 is a literal wilderness seem to ignore the fact that everything else mentioned in Revelation 12 is symbolic of something else that's literal. They seem to just completely forget that there is a pattern to Revelation 12 showing you over and over again that all of this stuff is symbolic language. Yet when they get to the wilderness, they want to make that be literal. They want to say this is a literal wilderness. So what we're going to have to do is go into the scriptures and see what this is talking about and answer the question, does this seem to be talking about a literal wilderness, or does it simply represent something else, just like everything else in the book of Revelation? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Because if we read through Revelation 12 and we see that everything in there represents something else, then it would stand to reason that the wilderness mentioned there represents something else other than a literal wilderness. That's what I want people to understand. And because of this, you got these Hebrew Israelites at each other's throats. They're all arguing and claiming they know where the wilderness is. That is a very presumptuous statement to make, being that the Bible itself does not say that. Well, we have to figure it out. Where does it say that you have to figure it out? Where does it say in the Bible you have to figure out where this place is? If it doesn't tell you that, why are you trying to do that? Did the children of Israel have to figure out where the place of safety was, or where the wilderness they were going to go to was when Moses and Aaron came on the scene? No. God sent two messengers, Moses and Aaron, to take care of that. But you got people today who've gotten so scared and have let their own fears get the best of them that some people have attempted to leave already. You got this big Hebrew Israelite congregation right now, headed by a guy named Ben-Ami. Years ago, he did the same thing and went to Jerusalem. He led his people through the desert before they got to Jerusalem because of what somebody misinterpreted in the scriptures. And that's the problem here, sisters and brothers. One of the biggest problems that I've seen when studying the scriptures is that people cannot decipher the literal from the metaphorical or the allegorical or the symbolic. They can't do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the book of Revelation, and we're going to start at the very verse we're looking for. We're going to go to Revelation chapter 12, and we're going to read verses 13 and 14. Revelation chapter 12 and verses 13 and 14. When you get that, LeBron, go ahead and start. You there, LeVar?
Yep, I'm here. Revelation
okay.
12, 13 through 14.
Yeah, go ahead and read.
All right. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child.
Go ahead.
And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time.
Now, look what this said, right? Go ahead, finish that.
From the face of the serpent.
Now, look what it said right here. When you read verse 13, it says, and when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Now, we have to ask ourselves, is this talking about a literal dragon? Is this talking about a literal woman? And is this talking about a literal child? Then you get to verse 14, it says, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle. Now we have to ask ourselves, were these literal wings of a great eagle? Right? Then finally, we have to ask ourselves, did this woman literally fly to a literal wilderness? Already I know that most of the Hebrew Israelites that teach that Revelation 12 is a literal wilderness will tell you, no, that was not a literal dragon. No, it was not a literal child at that time, not a baby anymore. They will say, no, there were not 2 literal wings, and no, not a literal eagle. But when they get to the wilderness, they say, yes, that's a literal wilderness. Now, something is wrong with that already from the beginning, sisters and brothers, because they're telling you, they're admitting to you up front that none of this is literal, but they want to make the wilderness be literal. I don't see how that flows, how that matches up. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to verse 1. And we're going to read this through, and as we read it through, I'm going to show you from the Bible how represent something other than what you're literally reading. So it will stand to reason that when you get to the wilderness, it must be the same thing. Because I, for the life of me, cannot see how you can read through all of chapter 12 and point out, this is symbolic, this is symbolic, this is symbolic, this is symbolic. Then you get to the wilderness, oh, that's a literal wilderness. Then you continue reading, this is symbolic, this is symbolic. Wait a minute. But I'll let you be the judge of that. So we're going to go to Revelation chapter 12, and we're going to start reading at verse 1, and we're going to read verses 1 and 2. Revelation 12, verses 1 and 2. Go ahead, LeVar.
And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
Now look what it says. This is John in a vision. He said, and there appeared a great woman in heaven, a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. There was a great wonder in heaven. In other words, in the sky. And I saw this woman. She was clothed with the sun. So she was wearing the sun, and she had the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. You have to ask yourself from the very beginning, sisters and brothers, is this a literal woman? Is she literally wearing the sun? Is the moon literally under her feet? Is she literally wearing a crown of 12 stars? Read verse 2.
And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered.
And she, this woman, being with child, cried. She was pregnant, travailing in birth. She was in labor, and pain to be delivered. She was in extreme pain trying to deliver this baby. So we already know that if this was not a literal woman, then that means this baby is symbolic in a sense. Even though we're going to read that this is a literal child that grew up to be a man. But if you read throughout the book of Revelation, Revelation 12, it keeps referring to this child as a man-child, right? So we got this woman. She's clothed with the sun, and she has the moon under her feet, and she has a crown of 12 stars. Is this a literal woman? Is any of this literal? No, sisters and brothers. I always tell people that the book of Revelation is the test book. It tests you on what you should already have learned before from reading the previous books. So if you don't know anything about any books, when you go into Revelation, it's going to confuse you. Right? So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Genesis 37. Let's see what this sun, this moon, and this 12 stars represent. Because it's right there in the book. Let's let the Bible interpret the Bible. Let's stop listening to these elders and teachers that are just simply telling us what things mean. Let's let the Bible tell us what it means. Did this same imagery show up in a previous book? That's a question you should ask yourself. Did it? Let's see. This is Genesis 37, and we're going to read verses 9 and 10. This is when Joseph was talking about his dreams. And he was sharing his dreams with his brothers and his father. But this is Genesis 37 and verses 9 and 10. Go ahead and read.
And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me.
Look what he said. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Why didn't he say 12? Because there were 12 tribes of Israel, the brothers, and Joseph was considered one of the tribes. So whoever these other 11 stars were made obeisance to him. In other words, they showed reverence to him, or they kneeled down to him out of respect. He didn't count himself. That's why he said, I saw 11 stars. But he also mentioned the sun and the moon. Go ahead and read.
Verse 10, and he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brother indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth?
Notice that Jacob was able to accurately interpret Joseph's dream. He knew that Joseph was referring to himself. But he also knew that the 11 stars represented the other 11 brothers of Joseph. He also knew that the sun represented him, Jacob, and he knew that the moon represented Rachel or Raquel, Joseph's biological mother. That's why Jacob said, he said, wait a minute, are you saying we're going to bow down to you? But is this not the same symbolism used in Revelation 12 to describe this woman? Yes, it is. You got the sun, you got the moon, and you got 12 stars. Genesis says 11 because Joseph did not count himself. And you know Joseph was one of the tribes, so he would have to be a star. So that's 12 stars right there, the sun and the moon. Right? So it's safe right now to conclude that this woman who was clothed with the sun and had the moon under her feet and with this crown of 12 stars represent the nation of Israel. But another thing it did in Revelation 12 is that it described this as a woman. So if we're telling you that this represents Israel, now we have to find somewhere in the Bible, somewhere else in the Bible, where Israel is described as a woman. Because we see Israel being described by 12 stars, the sun, and the moon. So now we have to see Israel being described as a woman to make sure that we're not misinterpreting the symbolism used in Revelation 12. This is how you approach the Bible, right? So now, let's go to Isaiah 54. This is what people don't get. I'm trying to get people to see that all of this is symbolic language in Revelation 12. All of it. So why would the wilderness be literal? Isaiah 54, and we're going to read verses 5 and 6. Isaiah 54, verses 5 and 6. When you get there, LeBar, go ahead and read.
For thy Maker is thine husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. The God of the whole earth shall he be called.
You can read throughout all the prophets, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Hosea, and they will all testify that God referred to himself as the husband of the nation of Israel. Right? So if God was the husband, that would make the nation of Israel the wife, and thereby be a woman. We're going to read that. Go ahead and read verse 6.
For the Lord hath called thee as a woman forsaken and grieved in spirit, and a wife of youth, when thou wast refused, saith thy God.
It says, for the Lord hath called thee as a woman. Who? The nation of Israel. Forsaken and grieved in spirit, and a wife of youth, when thou wast refused, saith thy God. It said Israel was called as a woman. Here, Israel is being likened unto a woman. But in Genesis, we see Israel being described as 12 stars, you know, Joseph being the 12th star, the sun and the moon. So there you have it again. A woman who's represented by the sun, the moon, and 12 stars. So now when we get to the book of Revelation, we know this isn't talking about a literal woman. This isn't talking about the literal moon or the literal sun or a literal star. This is talking about the nation of Israel. And it's not a literal woman. We know that. So now that we know that, let's go back to Revelation 12 and let's finish running this stuff down. We're going to be in and out of Revelation 12. It's not that hard, sisters and brothers. It really isn't. Revelation 12. And we're going to read verses 3 and 4 now. We're going piece by piece. Revelation 12, verse 3 and 4. Go ahead and read.
Appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads.
Now you say, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, or a red serpent, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. As we read later on into this chapter, because I don't want to skip, we're going to see that this represents Satan. If you read on into Revelation chapter 13, this description represents the nations of the earth who Satan controls. But we didn't get enough time to go into all that because all of that is a lesson in of itself. But you can go on to Revelation chapter 13 and read about that. But we're going to read a little bit more about this in Revelation 12. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But I'm showing you, it says, and there appeared another one in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. Verse 4.
And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Now, it's a lot said in this verse. It said, and his tail, this great red dragon, drew the third part of the stars of heaven. Drew means dragged or pulled. And did cast them to the earth. So already we know if this is not a literal dragon, then this cannot be literal stars that his tail is drawing. Can't be. And then it says, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. So we know this is not a literal woman. This is a nation that's going to produce a child, or more accurately, did produce a child. But what we want to do is see about these stars. What about these stars? Are these literal stars, or do they represent something? Let's see. Still in the book of Revelation, let's see what stars represent. Let's go to Revelation chapter 1. See, we got to let the Bible explain the Bible, sisters and brothers. That's the problem. We got too many of these elders trying to take it upon themselves to tell you what this means, when all you have to do is let the Bible interpret itself. And you have to go to the right scriptures. You can't go to a scripture that doesn't have anything to do with what you're reading and say, see, this is what this means. It has to be in proper context, too. So now we're in Revelation chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 16 to 20. Revelation chapter 1, verses 16 to 20. Go ahead and read.
And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength.
Now this is talking about Jesus Christ. It's describing him, right? Go ahead.
Verse 17. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. I am he that liveth and was dead. And behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the
now look what it says. Now hold on one second. Now look what it says. Verse 16 told you, and he had in his right hand 7 stars. If Jesus literally holding 7 stars in his right hand, we're going to see what these stars represent. Go ahead and read.
He said, verse 18, I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death. Write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 20, the mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
And the 7 candlesticks thou sawest are the 7 churches.
Now notice that Jesus said that the 7 stars are the 7 angels that were sent to the 7 churches. The 7 stars. Stars represent angels in the book of Revelation. Except in that one place we read in the beginning where it says she had on her head a crown of 12 stars, come off the woman. The stars there represented the 12 tribes of Israel. You can get that from reading Genesis 37. But everywhere else in the book of Revelation, stars represent angels. Let me show you one other incident. Go over to Revelation chapter 9. We're going to read one verse there. 1. Revelation 9 and verse 1. Go ahead and read, Lamar.
And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit.
Notice what it said. And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven. A star fell from the sky, and unto him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Is this a literal star? Because if you say that it is, then this literal star was given the key to the bottomless pit. Right? But go right over into Revelation 20. You're going to read the same thing, but in reverse. Revelation 20. Revelation 20 and verse 1. Go ahead and read.
And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having a key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand.
Isn't that not the same thing we just read in Revelation 9, LeVar?
Mm-hmm.
But the only difference is in Revelation 20 and 1, it called it an angel, while in Revelation 9 and 1, it called it a star. But the same thing is going on. Both are coming down from heaven, and both have the key to the bottomless pit. Use your common sense, sisters and brothers. That star in Revelation 9 and 1 is an angel. But it called it a star. Why? Because in the book of Revelation, stars are used to represent angels. So when you go to Revelation 12 and it says the dragon's tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth, it meant a third of the angels, sisters and brothers. This dragon, which we're going to later read was Satan or the devil, was able to convince a third of the angels of heaven to follow him. Notice we're letting the Bible interpret the Bible. Notice all of this symbolizes stuff. So why is it that when we get to the wilderness, oh, that's a wilderness. That's a literal wilderness right there. Does that really make sense? I mean, just being honest, does that make sense? It doesn't. Well, let's continue reading. Let's go back to Revelation 12. Because as I said, we're going to be in and out of there. We're going to Revelation 12 and 5. Because you got brothers who have made entire lessons on the wilderness. And they'll go here, and they go to all these places in the Old Testament where it just talks about random things concerning the wilderness, and they just mesh it all together and say, see, we know what's going on. No, you do not. You cannot just go to the Old Testament and read about a wilderness or something special happening in a wilderness and say, this is what this is talking about, when you can't read anywhere where God told you to figure out where this place of safety is. The children of Israel have to figure out what wildernesses they were going to. That's what Moses and Aaron was there for. So right in the end time, what do you have? You have two witnesses that are going to be on the scene. Coincidence? I don't think so. Those two witnesses are going to tell you where this wilderness is.
Mm-hmm.
But already we're starting to see that it doesn't even make sense that it will be a literal wilderness. In case y'all don't know, a wilderness is a desert. And sometimes it just means like we think of it today, like a forest. We're going to read that. Or the woods. Right? But we're back in Revelation 12. I want you to read verse 5. Go read about this man-child again. Go ahead and read.
And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne.
It says this woman, and she brought forth a man-child. Notice that this child that this woman brought forth is being described as a child throughout this whole chapter. But is it still a child? It says she brought forth a man-child, which means a male child or a boy, a baby boy, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. We know that the woman represents the nation of Israel. So what this is saying is, this child would be born from the nation of Israel, which is true of Jesus Christ because he was a Hebrew Israelite. But what about the part where it says about him ruling the nations with a rod of iron? Let's go to Revelation 19. We're going to Revelation 19. It's not hard, sisters and brothers. We make it hard because we wish that we knew things that have not been revealed in the Bible. The Bible does not say where this wilderness is. It does not say, sisters and brothers. And for some people, that's not enough. If it doesn't say, it's because God did not want you to know. It's just that simple. So what people do is they start inventing locations for this wilderness, not even taking into consideration that it may not even be a literal wilderness to begin with. After all, nothing we've read about so far has represented exactly what it is. There wasn't a literal woman, wasn't a literal sun, wasn't a literal moon, wasn't a literal star, no longer a literal man-child, because Revelation 12 describes this child as a child throughout the whole chapter, like he's still a baby. But this baby is used to represent a grown man. Wasn't a literal dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. None of that is literal, sisters and brothers. They all represent something. That's the pattern of Revelation 12. You can't have a pattern that says this, and then stop it and say that, and then go back to this. You cannot do that. But believe it or not, that's what a lot of people are doing right now with Revelation chapter 12. They will admit to you that all of this stuff you reading about, that I'm telling you, they will not disagree with me. They'll say all of this stuff is symbolic. They'll tell you the same thing, but when they get to the wilderness, they'll tell you that's a literal wilderness. The reason why they tell you that's a literal wilderness is because they never went in the Bible to try to see if the wilderness is ever used in a symbolic way. That's the problem. They've never done that. They can go to the Bible and show you exactly everything I'm showing you. I'm not giving this to y'all, what I'm showing y'all now, as if I'm the only person that knows this. I can take you to other places, and they can show you the same thing, and they will come up with exactly what I'm telling y'all or something very similar. But when it comes to the wilderness, everybody wants to make that be a literal wilderness. I don't understand that, LeVar. But Revelation 19, we're going to read verse 11 through 15 and see about this man-child. Go ahead and read.
Revelation 19 and 11, it reads, And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in his righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God.
Now we know this is talking about Jesus Christ. Question, LeVar, is Jesus Christ still a man-child right now?
No.
No, he is not a man-child. He's not a baby anymore. But in the book of Revelation, Revelation 12, a man-child is used to represent a grown man. Jesus was about 33 years old when he died. So why would you keep referring to him as a man-child? Can you read anywhere in the Bible where a grown man is called a man-child after he grows up?
No.
That's not how it's described. You're a lad or a boy, then when you grow up, they call you a man. But a man-child just means a baby boy. That's all that means. Or a male child, right? Now, we know that Jesus is a grown man, so we know when he comes back, he's going to be a grown man. He's not going to come back as a baby. Go ahead and read it.
Verse 14, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. He treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God.
Now look what else it says. It says, out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he shall smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. That's what we read about what the man-child will do in Revelation 12. A man-child, but is no longer a child. So the man-child represents the adult version of the Messiah that's going to rule the nations with a rod of iron. Even though Jesus was literally a baby at one time, man-child is still used to describe this child throughout Revelation 12. It could have easily said, and when this man-child grows up, it just keeps referring to him as a man-child. Because it's trying to let you know that this baby being born was special. But the point is, man-child does not represent a literal man-child throughout the book of Revelation. At some point, it represents a grown man, even though still calls it a man-child. So I'm showing y'all this to illustrate the point that man-child is even symbolic of a grown man. This baby boy represents a grown man that's going to come back one day and rule the nations with a rod of iron. More symbolism. Why am I bringing this up to y'all? Because I'm trying to let y'all see that all the way down, from beginning to the end, all of this is symbolic. But for some odd reason, they get to the wilderness, and they want the wilderness to be a literal wilderness. I don't understand it. And then they go and make all these other lessons where the wilderness is supposed to be located here, or the wilderness is supposed to be located there. And there are numerous doctrines out there. These people don't know what to do. They are completely confused. Because everybody is just going in the Bible and just telling you this means this means that. They don't even understand that a wilderness is a desert. Nothing grows in the desert, sisters and brothers. Well, see, God is going to provide it for us in the wilderness like he did with the children of Israel. Yeah, that makes sense. There's only one problem. When you read Revelation 12, I don't see anything literal about everything else I'm reading. So why would the wilderness be literal? You're going to look at all this symbolic language and then get to one place and say, okay, this is literal. And then jump back. That's the crazy part of the ball. Jump back to the symbolism after the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
They jump back to the symbolism. They give you symbolism, literal. Okay, now back to the symbolism. What? How you do that? And then they look at me like I'm crazy because I'm saying I don't see it being a literal wilderness because nothing else in this chapter is literal. Nothing else in this chapter represents exactly what it's talking about. Nothing else does. But let's keep going. Let's go to Mark chapter 16, because it also told you that this man-child was caught up to the throne of God. Let's see when this literally happened. Mark 16 and 19. One verse. Mark 16 and 19. This is not really that hard to figure out, sister and brother. All you have to do is let the Bible interpret the Bible. That's it. Revelation is the test book. But if you don't study for the test, you're going to fail. And I don't think people go into the book of Revelation and pull out all kinds of crazy interpretations. It don't make any stuff in Revelation. This is nuclear war right here. What? No, the same symbolism is used in the Old Testament. And you can clearly see in the Old Testament that it wasn't talking about no nuclear war because it describes in the Old Testament something that already happened. They didn't have nuclear bombs back then. So how come you see the same symbolism shows up in the New Testament talking about future events, it has to be nuclear war? It's described the exact same way. So whatever it meant back then, that's what it means. It's using the same symbolism. This is why people go to Matthew 24 and they see the sun and the moon shall turn dark and the stars shall fall from heaven. And they say, see, this is what's going to literally happen when Jesus comes back. And I can take you to the Old Testament and show you 5 other places where it said that happened there in history. But did it literally happen? No. Because they don't understand it. That just represents dark times are coming. And dark times mean just bad times, troublous times. That's all it means. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that. So they get to the New Testament, they read that stuff, they think it's literal. No. You have to understand this stuff before you start diving into the New Testament books. And most importantly, the book of Revelation. They don't understand this stuff. So they mess all this stuff up and they start creating all these bizarre doctrines. And then they look at you stupid when you don't want to go for it. That doesn't mean that, brother. Where are you getting that from? Well, I'm just saying, that's what I was taught. That's the problem. Just because you were taught that doesn't mean it was correct. So since we're seeing what everything represents, then we got to see what the wilderness represents too, how it was used symbolic, right? But Mark 16 and 19, that one verse. Go ahead and read.
So then, after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God.
Was Jesus a baby when this happened or a grown man, LeVar?
He was a grown man.
He was a grown man, but in the book of Revelation 12, it said the man-child was caught up to the throne of God. So the man-child represents Jesus Christ. This is when it literally happened, but he was not literally a baby when it happened. He was a man. Man-child represents this man that this happened to. I'm going back and forth to show you that the book of Revelation tells you stuff in symbolic language, and then you go to where it literally happened or what it literally represents. So like with the stars of heaven, I showed you that it called angels stars. But you got people that read the book of Revelation, and they read about stars falling from heaven and doing this, and they think it's about a meteorite.
Yeah.
I've seen people do that. It's about a meteorite. See, this meteorite's going to come, and it's going to do what? No. It already told you what it represents. See, when the Bible tells you what something represents, there's no excuse for you to mess it up. I understand that the Bible don't tell you what everything means, and therefore people will just take wild guesses at it, even though they shouldn't do that. But I can understand why you feel the need to guess, because it doesn't give the information. But there is no reason for you to get this stuff wrong when it plainly tells you what it represents. And then you show people what the Bible plainly tells you what this stuff represents. They still be kicking, no, tell me, man, it means this. No, it doesn't. I was on Foul Show one day, and the brother, I was debating, I forget who the brother was, but he was trying to convince me that the curses in Deuteronomy 28 that was going to come upon the children of Israel did not come to pass until at least 70 A.D. Even though he didn't say 70 A.D., he said America. He said that. I could have showed that in 70 A.D., but I took him to the book of Daniel and showed it where it plainly said, Daniel plainly said, that the curses written in the law of Moses has come upon us for our sins. Meaning those curses in Deuteronomy 28 were fulfilled when the children of Israel first went into Babylonian captivity. It plainly says that. The brother's still like, nope, that ain't what they're talking about. That's the problem, sisters and brothers. These people are so indoctrinated that even when the Bible plainly tells you what it's saying, they don't believe it. So my question to y'all is, if these people can't see when the Bible plainly tells them something, how they going to understand the Bible when it's using all this symbolic language and allegorical comparisons and all of that stuff? How they going to understand that? They can't even see it when it's plainly telling you. And this is why this class is important, because people refuse to see what the Bible is plainly saying, and now you got people all over the internet and in these congregations telling people that not only is this a literal wilderness, but they know where it's going to be at. You follow what I'm saying? That's how out of control it has gotten. So let me show you something else. We see what the man-child being caught up to the throne represents. It represents Jesus as a grown man ascending to heaven. That's what that's referring to. Now let's go back to Revelation 12. We're running it all down. Not really that hard. We're going to Revelation 12, and we're going to read verses 6 to 14. Revelation 12 and verses 6 to 14. When you get there, LeVar, go ahead and read.
And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
Which averages out to about 3.5 years. It says, and the woman, which was not a literal woman, by the way, we know that, fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Right now, we're not going to deal with what the wilderness represents. Why not, Josh? I want to read through the rest of this until we get to the wilderness being mentioned again. Then I will tell y'all what the wilderness represents. Why am I doing it like that? Because I want to show y'all that even after verse 6, it continues on with this symbolic language. I want to give you all the symbolism this chapter has to offer, so you can see, oh, this is symbolic. Then we go back to deal with the wilderness. You'll say, oh, I get it. But now, verse 7, go ahead and read.
Verse 7, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels.
Now, this is something else we're starting to learn. Hold on one second. This is something else we're starting to see now. Is that there was a war in heaven. Michael, we can read about Michael in the book of Daniel, right? You know Michael is the archangel. We know that, right? Michael and his angels, meaning Michael had an army. It says, and the dragon fought and his angels. The dragon is the devil. That's not a spoiler. Y'all already knew that, but we're going to read it anyway. It says the dragon fought and his angels. Where did the dragon get his angels from? You go back to verse 4. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven. Do y'all see that? That's where he got his angels from. His angels are those, is that third part of the stars of heaven that you just read about in verse 4. So it's all coming together now. See, people say, Satan got kicked out of heaven. When I was growing up, my mom used to always tell me that Satan got kicked out of heaven. The average Christian knows that. Shoot, even the average person that don't go to church have heard that before, but not many people tell you that Satan took a third of the angels with him. My mama never told me that. So these angels are fighting against each other. But the angels, they're warring against each other. It said there was war in heaven, and angels are called stars. So now you got a war and you got stars. Star Wars, sisters and brothers. That's just another Bible real reference. Y'all know the Star Wars series? You got stars fighting each other. But that's getting off into something else. Right? Now, verse 8, go ahead and read.
And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven.
Some about the dragon and his angels, they lost. Neither was their place found any more in heaven, which lets you know at one time all of them dwelled in heaven. Go ahead and read.
Verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
Now it's telling us who this dragon is. Notice how sometimes the book of Revelation, when it tells you stuff in a symbolic way, you can go to another place in the book of Revelation to get the answer of what it's talking about. Or sometimes you have to go outside of the book of Revelation entirely and go to a previous book in the Bible. But either way you look at it, the answer is in the Bible if it's meant to be given. So you don't have to guess. Right? Now we know who the dragon is because it told us in the same chapter that this dragon represents Satan. Satan is not literally a dragon or a literal serpent, sisters and brothers. These are just creatures that are used to deceive him. Satan is a spirit. That's what he is. He's an evil spirit. He's a fallen angel. But they're using the word dragon and serpent to describe him. But he's not literally a dragon or a serpent, sisters and brothers. So now we see that this dragon represents a fallen evil spirit, Satan. And it's telling you, which is the devil and Satan. Why is John saying this? Because he wants to let you know, I'm not talking about a literal dragon, sisters and brothers. I'm talking about Satan, the devil. That's what I'm talking about. Go ahead and read.
Verse 10, and I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now comes salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brother is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night.
See, when you read verse 10, nothing symbolic there. It's telling you what was going on. The accuser of our brother is cast down, right? Now comes salvation and the power of our God and the power of his Christ. See, every now and then in the book of Revelation, John will let you know exactly what's really going on. Right? Now, read verse 11. Go ahead.
And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death.
Who does the Lamb represent, LeVar?
Jesus Christ.
So is this a literal lamb?
No.
More symbolic language. You see how every time we read, they got something in this chapter that represents something other than what it's really referring to. Do y'all see the pattern yet? Because already we're in verse 11, and there are only 17 verses in this chapter. So if you don't see this by now, then you're not going to see it. Because we're at verse 11, and already we can see this represents this represents that, this represents that. Right? Go ahead and read, verse 12.
Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time.
Now notice in verse 12, all literal now. Now he's starting to blend what these things represent with the symbolic language. He's going to be jumping back and forth between what they really represent and back to the allegorical terms for them. That's what he's going to be doing. But he's still in a pattern. You follow what I'm saying? That's like if I'm telling a story about somebody I know and I use their real name and then I refer to them as their allegorical name, not going back to their real name, their allegorical name, I'm still not breaking the pattern of the allegorical. Because I'm letting you, all the thing I'm doing is just letting you know what it represents in between me using the allegorical. So we still got the same pattern going on here. But go ahead and read. Verse 13.
And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child.
Notice it don't jump back to calling him a dragon again. It just told you in verse 12, the devil. Right? But that's okay because we know that this dragon is the devil. So you can logically read this, and when the devil, or when Satan saw he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. We know that the woman is Israel, and we know that the man-child is Jesus Christ. So now that we know what all this means, we can read verse 13 to say, and when Satan saw that he was cast to the earth, he persecuted Israel, or the nation of Israel, which brought forth the Messiah, Jesus Christ. This is what this is saying. Because we know what everything represents. That's how you approach the book of Revelation, sisters and brothers. You don't approach it with these Hail Mary interpretations that these guys be coming up with. They don't do any studying, so they have to make stuff up. That's what you do when you don't know. You make stuff up. That's what they're doing. Right? Now read verse 14.
And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, and to her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent.
That's another way of saying 3.5 years. Now, let's pay attention to this, right? It says, and took the woman, which was not a literal woman, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, which I'm going to show you these were not literal wings. So the wings are not literal. That she might fly into the wilderness, which they say is literal, so that she might be nourished from the face of the serpent, which is not literal. So what's going on in LeVar? When, according to them, you got symbolic for the woman, symbolic for the wings of the great eagle, literal wilderness, symbolic serpent. Do you see what's wrong here, LeVar? You see what's wrong here?
Yeah, inconsistent.
It's inconsistent. How is the woman not literal? The great wings given to her not literal, but the wilderness is literal, but the serpent is not a literal serpent. You gotta just try to force that literal wilderness interpretation in between all this symbolic language. That's a problem, sister and brother. But the problem is nobody has ever took the time to try to see what the wilderness represents in the Bible. Let me show y'all these eagle's wings. Let's go to Exodus chapter 19. I like to go to the Israel of God. And I remember every time they read about the eagle's wings in verse 14, they would say that means we're going to be on an airplane and get up out of here. Really? That's what they used to say. Because nobody's paying attention to the symbolism in the Bible. Because if that's what that means, then what I'm about to read to you now would mean they had to get up on an airplane to get from where they're going. This is Exodus chapter 19, and we're going to read verses 3 and 4. And yeah, I put the name of the Israel of God out there. So what? That's what they teach. That's where I came from. That's where I got my first misinterpretation of this from. And just in case somebody from the Israel of God is listening, they can go back and share this with other people. This is Revelation 19 and verses 11. Exodus 19. I already read Revelation 19. Exodus 19 and verses 3 and 4. Go ahead and read, LeVar.
And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel.
So he's talking to the children of Israel, right? And we know this is a long time ago, long before there was such thing as an airplane. We know that. Go ahead and read.
Verse 4, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself.
Now let me ask you a question, LeVar. When God brought the children of Israel up out of Egypt with signs and wonders, did they fly on any eagle's wings, literally? Did they do that?
Not at all.
So that means that must represent something. In ancient times, the eagle was seen as a majestic bird that could fly very fast. So what that simply means is God delivered them from Egypt very swiftly. It does not mean he literally stuck them on a giant eagle and flew them out of Egypt. The same symbolism is used in Revelation 12, that to the woman was giving wings of a great eagle. That just simply means that he's going to get them to wherever he's going to keep them protected very swiftly. That's all it means. But people have read that and say, see, that means we're going to get on the airplane. Some people might do get on the airplane to get wherever God is going. But you cannot make that be the interpretation of that. Because what it means is he got them there swiftly. And from what I read in Revelation 12, in the book of Exodus, they did all this on foot. They walked out of Egypt. But yet, he said, I bear you on eagle's wings. See, even the eagle's wings represent something other than what it's talking about. So the eagle's wings are not literal. The woman is not literal, and the face of the serpent is not literal. But let's make the wilderness literal of all. Let's do that. No, we're not going to do that. So now that we see that everything in Revelation 12 represents something other than what it's talking about, then is it really that far-fetched to believe that the wilderness represents something other than a literal wilderness? Is it really that far-fetched? Is it really that big of a stretch? No. So now let's see what the wilderness represents. Let's see how they use the wilderness poetically. Let's go to Psalms chapter 55. We're going to Psalms chapter 55. If you want to sit around and wait for one of these crazy elders to drag you to the middle of a desert and tell you you're going to be safe, you go ahead and you do that. I'm not doing that. Because you got to be able to discern between the literal and the symbolic. This is Psalms chapter 55, and we're reading the prayer of David. And watch how David used the wilderness poetically. Watch how he uses it. Look what it represents to him. Psalm 55, verses 1 to 8. Go ahead and read.
Verse 1. Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not thyself from my supplication. Attend unto me and hear me. I mourn in my complaint and make a noise. Because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they cast iniquity upon me. And in wrath they hate me.
So David is talking about his enemies pursuing him. They want to hurt him. So he's asking God to hear his prayer to deliver him from his enemies. Go ahead and read.
Verse 4. My heart is sore pain within me, and the terrors of death are fallen upon me. Sinfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror hath overwhelmed me.
He said, horror hath overwhelmed me. Now read verse 6.
And I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then would I fly away. And
he said, I wish I had wings like a dove, so I could fly away and be at rest. And what else?
Lo, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness. Selah.
Now he said, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness, Selah. To do what? Read verse 8.
I will hasten my escape from the windy storm.
And the windy storm and tempest that he's referring to was among his enemies trying to persecute him. But look what he said in verse 7. Lo, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness. To David, the wilderness represented a place to get away from persecution. Because we're going to read later on where David literally fled to the wilderness to escape persecution as well as some other people. So what happened is because the children of Israel knew that people would run to the wilderness to escape persecution, the wilderness began to represent a place of getaway. Not a specific wilderness, just the wilderness in general. So it was used symbolic to represent any place where you could just get away. When David said that I wish I could go to the wilderness, what he was really saying was that I just wish I could go somewhere where nobody could bother me. That's all he was saying. A place where I can be alone and be safe. Because that's what the wilderness was, a solitary place where nothing but animals were. No man was there. That's all he's really saying. I just want to go somewhere where my enemies can't bother me. That's all he's saying. And at that time in history, the wilderness was the best place for something like that. So he used the wilderness to represent a place of safety. I'm going to show you another example of that. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 9. This is how the Hebrews saw the wilderness. That's what it began to represent to them. It just represented a place where you could go to get away from persecution and wickedness. That's what it represented. Notice David didn't even mention a specific wilderness. He just said, I just wish I could go to the wilderness. He didn't mention a specific spot. He just said the wilderness. This is Jeremiah 9 and verses 1 and 2. Jeremiah 9 and verses 1 and 2. Go ahead and read.
Oh, that my head were waters, and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people.
This is Jeremiah mourning about how many of his people have died. have died. That's what he's mourning about, right? He said, man, I'm crying so much, I wish my head were waters and my eyes a fountain of tears. So I can really weep. I wish I could just cry out a fountain. Watch what he said in verse 2. Go ahead.
Oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place of wayfaring men, that I might leave my people and go from them. For they be all adulterers, an assembly of treacherous men.
Doesn't it sound like what David said? Now Jeremiah is using the wilderness in the same way. He said, oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place of wayfaring men, that I might leave my people and go from them, for they be all adulterers and an assembly of treacherous men. What he was simply saying was, I wish I had a place to go where I can get away from all of these wicked people. That's how they use the wilderness symbolically, sisters and brothers, or as a metaphor in the Old Testament. And remember, I told you that in order for you to understand what something represents in Revelation, you have to understand how it was used in previous books. And in previous books, when it wasn't talking about a literal wilderness, the wilderness was used just to represent any place where you could just get away from persecution or wickedness. Not a literal wilderness necessarily, but because the wilderness was the best place they knew of to actually do this, they used the wilderness as a metaphor to describe just getting away. That's all it is. Do you think David would literally want to go to the wilderness to escape persecution, to a place where there's no food, no water? That's not what he literally wanted, but that's the best place he could think of, because at that time in history, that's the only place where men did not dare travel. Even over in the Middle East today, a lot of people stay away from the extreme parts of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Even today. And this is what people did when they was avoiding persecution. They would literally flee to the wilderness. They would literally do that. And we're going to read why David literally did that. Now, why in the world, if David literally fled to the wilderness in his lifetime, would he write in the book of Psalms that he wished he could do that? What do you mean you wish you could do it? You did actually do it. Because in the book of Psalms, he was not talking about literally wanting to go to the wilderness. He was talking about, I wish I could go somewhere where nobody could bother me, where I could flee from my enemies. He didn't want to go to the wilderness. That's a very substandard way of living. That's what John the Baptist lived in the wilderness. What he ate locusts and wild honey. That's all he could get his hands on. Nobody wants to live in the wilderness, sisters and brothers. But that's what you do if you fleeing from persecution. And a lot of people flee from persecution by going to the wilderness because they know that the average person don't want to go through there. They ain't going to follow you there. But if they want you bad enough, they'll pursue you there. Also, it's a good hiding place. Even today, when fugitives be running from the law, they take to the woods. If they're on the road, they see police come, they hit the woods. It's hard to track somebody in the woods than it is out in the open and in towns and stuff. But what the Hebrews did is they started to use the wilderness to represent a place of safety. Not necessarily a literal wilderness, just anywhere I can go to get away from persecution. That's why Jeremiah said the same thing. He said, oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place. I mean, a place I could stay. Jeremiah could have literally fled from the wilderness at some point, fled to the wilderness. But that's what the wilderness represents. Now, let me show y'all something else. Now, let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 23. We only got one more after that. 1 Samuel chapter 23. We're going to read verses 13 and 15. We're reading about David running from Saul. I'm showing y'all that they literally used the wilderness to flee persecution. So that became symbolic. The wilderness became synonymous with any place of safety where you can get away from your enemies. Y'all understand what I'm saying? That's what happened after a while. It became synonymous with that. Now the wilderness represents you being a place where you can just get away from persecution. That's how they used it. That's what Jeremiah meant. That's what David meant. They meant, I just wish I could go somewhere where nobody could persecute me. At that time in history, the wilderness was the best place they could think of to say that. I'm pretty sure there was a better place than that. They would have said, I wish I could go there. This is 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 13 to 15. When you get there, go ahead and read.
Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah, and went whithersoever they could go. And it was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbore to go forth.
It was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbore to go forth. He did not want to go forth, but go ahead and read.
And David abode in the wilderness and strongholds, and remained in the mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hand.
So David abode in the wilderness. In this context, like I told y'all, sometimes it means the woods or the forest. In this context, it's talking about the forest. It's not talking about the desert. I'm going to show y'all that in a second, right? So David ran to the wilderness, right? Why? Because it was a good hiding place. This is what people always did. They would go to the wilderness. But go ahead and read.
Verse 15. And David saw that Saul was come out to seek his life. And David was in the wilderness of Ziph in the wood.
And David was in the wilderness of Ziph in the woods or in the forest. So notice how when David was being persecuted, he ran to the wilderness. That's what they did. When you were being persecuted, you ran to the wilderness. Right? Or to the mountains. Or to the mountains in the wilderness. Places where you could hide it. And Israel knew that's what people used to do in the wilderness, so they started to use the wilderness in their writings to represent a place of getaway. That's all it means when they use it that way. This is literal right here you're reading. But when you read how Jeremiah used it and how David used it in the book of Psalms, it just represents a place of getaway. So that means when you go to the book of Revelations and it said the woman was taken to the wilderness, it just meant whatever safe place God is going to put these people to protect them from persecution. That's all it means. How can you say that, Josh? Because everything else in Revelation represents something other than what it literally is. That's how I can say that. And then I'm taking you to the Old Testament and show you how they're using the wilderness to describe a place of getaway. But let me show you one more example of that. We're going to the Apocrypha. We're going to 1 Maccabees chapter 2. 1 Maccabees chapter 2. And we're going to read verses 27 to 30. I'm telling y'all, sister and brother, it's here. You can't read all through the book of Revelation and then read Revelation 12 and see all this symbolic language and then get to the wilderness and make the wilderness be literal. Even after verse 14 in Revelation 12, it talks about the serpent sending a great flood out of his mouth to pursue a woman. I got a whole class on that y'all can order. It's called the flood in Revelation 12 or something like that. Showing y'all that flood is symbolic.
The serpent's flood.
Yeah, the serpent's flood. That's what it's called, the serpent's flood. Showing you that is symbolic. That's right after verse 14, where it talks about the wilderness. So the flood is not literal. The serpent is not literal. The woman is not literal. The eagle's wings are not literal. The man-child is not a child literally anymore. The dragon is not a literal dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. None of that is literal. So why is the wilderness literal? Because you want it to be. That's why it's literal. I'm just staying with the flow of the whole chapter. And the whole chapter shows me that something represents something else. So when I get to the wilderness, what I did is I'm going to go in the Old Testament or somewhere else in the book of Revelation, if I can, to see how the wilderness was used in a symbolic way. I'm not going to go to a literal place, because that's what they do. They go to all the places where the wilderness was used as a literal getaway place. And that's why they want to make it literal in Revelation 12. But Revelation 12 only have symbolic stuff, which means everything represents something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Bible and see if I can find somewhere where the wilderness is used to represent something instead of being a literal place. And if I find that, I have found my answer. So what does that mean? Just represent any place of safety. That's all wilderness means in Revelation 12, a place of safety. That's it. This is 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verses 27 to 30. This is about Matthias, during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, when he was trying to pollute the sanctuary and destroy the laws of God and all that other stuff. And this guy Matthias rebelled against him with a group of other people. Let's see what they did to avoid persecution. Go ahead and read, LeVar, verse 27 through 30. Go ahead.
Oh, you know what? I ain't bring my apocrypha with me. I'm at my grandmother's house. Go ahead and read it, bro.
That's cool. I got it. It says, and Matthias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. So they abandoned everything that they had. They abandoned everything. But look what it says right here, verse 29. It says, then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there. They went to the wilderness. They literally went to the wilderness. Why? And their cattle, because afflictions increased sore upon them. They were being persecuted. So they fled to the wilderness. That's what people used to do. You can read this all throughout the Old Testament. When people were being persecuted or being pursued, they would flee to the wilderness, whether it's the desert or the forest. They would flee there. So the wilderness became synonymous with any place you could go to get safety, because that's how they literally used it. So when you go to Revelation 12, and it talks about this woman fled to the wilderness where she was nourished, all it means is wherever God chooses to keep her safe. It just represents a place of safety. It's not talking about a literal wilderness, no more than it's talking about a literal woman, a literal serpent, a literal flood, literal moon, literal stars, literal sun, literal dragon with literally 7 heads and 10 horns, or a literal tail, literally drawing the third part of the stars of heaven. Come on, y'all. All of this is symbolic language. So why would you go to the wilderness and make that be a literal wilderness? I don't understand it. Literal eagle's wings? No. So as you can see, sisters and brothers, to answer the question, is the wilderness in Revelation 12 a literal wilderness? All of the evidence suggests that the answer is no. Everything else in Revelation 12 represents something other than what it is. Everything else. So it would not make sense or be scripturally sound to make the wilderness represent a literal wilderness, especially when you can go into the scriptures and show how they use the wilderness symbolic to just represent a place where you can get away from persecution of your enemies. But if you want to continue to believe it's a literal wilderness, go right ahead. But I tell you this, there's going to come a time where somebody's going to jump up and tell you to follow them into a wilderness, like it happened in the past. And if you do, and you perish out there, then you will perish in your own foolishness, and you will have nobody to blame but yourself. See you next time.